Here we go. Oh, you should, I think we're live on Twitter. Can you share it right now? It's okay. Yeah, we're live on Twitter. So go to your Twitter account and retweet it.
I'm on Twitter. You mean Blue Sky? I'm not on Twitter.
Oh, you're off of Twitter?
I'm off Twitter for a year and a half, and it's terrible, but I am.
It's terrible that you're off, or terrible that...
Yeah, I really miss it, Pete. I really miss it.
You should come back. It's really great over there.
Okay,
I'm joking. It's not great, but I don't know. I always think that like people left Twitter because of the principle of it, right? But it's like they're all bad. All platforms are bad. So that's how I justify it.
It was kind of an act of conscience.
A what?
An act of conscience. Supporting Elon Musk was not something I could do.
Yeah, I know, but it's like you're supporting Facebook. You're supporting Mark Zuckerberg.
I know.
I mean, all the platforms are bad. Anyway, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. I'm happy you're here. It's time to talk doom and gloom. It's June. The Supreme Court has made a bunch of decisions today. 4 decisions came down, but we're only talking about 2?
5 decisions came down. We're going to talk about 2, but I want to mention the 6 that did not come down really quickly. They set for next year, they reset the argument for next year in a voting rights case out of Louisiana. That you and I are going to be here a year from today talking about that case, because the court is going to basically say that no longer can race be used in any form in redistricting, which is really going to hurt black people and help white people. But that's a year from today. They didn't do that today. They did enough today. I think they decided enough was enough.
And just to be clear, this is it. Today was the last day. We're not going to hear anything else from the Supreme Court until they're back from their vacation.
They are done. And I want to do my usual rant, Pete. They announced the decisions this morning. The liberals dissented, and Justice Sotomayor and Jackson were all talking passionately. And we should have been able to see it, and we should have been able to hear it. And it's insulting to democracy, to transparency, and to the rule of law that our highest court issues these landmark decisions. There are 225 or 50 people in the courtroom who get to see it and hear it, and the rest of us don't. They do now. You know, we can hear their oral arguments, but we can't hear when they announce their decisions, and that's an affront to everything that's good and decent.
The headline at New York Times: Supreme Court limits use of nationwide injunctions. Ruling allows Trump order ending birthright citizenship to take partial effect. And there's more as well, right?
Yes, there's 2 big cases we should talk about.
Okay.
The birthright citizenship case and the, I think, more important case, the Let's Destroy Public School case, which is out of Maryland, which we should spend most of our time on, I think.
Okay.
Let's start with birthright citizenship. One thing your audience needs to know is the court did not decide on whether or not Trump's executive order was constitutional or not. It has been the case since 1868 in America that if you're born here, you're a citizen here. Doesn't matter who your parents are, doesn't matter how you got here. If you're born here, you're a citizen. There were only a couple exceptions, one for children of diplomats and one for some Native American tribes, because we gave them some sovereignty on their own. But everybody else, no matter how you got here, if you're born here, you're a citizen. And the Trump executive order says that's not true. It is patently unconstitutional. I think there's almost unanimity on that among legal scholars. But that's not what the court did today. What the court did today was, can a district court judge, a lower court federal judge, issue a ruling that says what the president or Congress has done violates the Constitution, and they must stop it right now, as to everybody. It's called a universal injunction. We enjoin the federal government from enforcing this order against anybody. The court said, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore, which means if a judge in Georgia, if a federal judge in the South issues an order saying birthright citizenship is unconstitutional, Trump's order is unconstitutional, but a Montana judge says it's constitutional, then we're going to have different rules in different parts of the country. And for national legal issues, that's very problematic. Now, it is a nonpartisan decision in one sense. During the Biden administration, crazy judges in Texas, as you and I discussed many times, enjoined Biden policies nationally based on one case. And Democrats were mad about it. But you know what Democrats were mad about? They were mad that the ruling was wrong. They weren't mad that a judge could stop the national government from doing something unconstitutional. Right. And that's different, Pete. And then Mike Dorff, who you know, and is the place where I blog, Dorff on Law, wrote something really important today. And I'm glad he finally said it. What he said was, true, this applies to Democrat presidents and Republican presidents. In that sense, it's nonpartisan. But these are different times. And Trump is he's not George Bush. He's not Ronald Reagan. It's a different time period. This Supreme Court refuses to acknowledge that. It did it in the Trump immunity case. It's doing it in this case. And it is a dagger in democracy. It just is. So taking this power away from lower court judges, the power to say, stop, you can't do this to anybody, is a very serious thing. And then one more thing I want to rant about. Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote the majority opinion. I've been screaming at the top of my lungs at my fellow liberals, do not trust her. She's as conservative as they come, and they yell back at me. What she wrote today was, we're not even going to decide if this is good or bad policy, which should be the question. The question should be, should we allow lower court judges to do this, good or bad? And there were reasons on both sides. She didn't say that. She said, all we're going to look to see is, did this happen in 1788? And since it didn't, she said, no, we're not going to do it. And do you know how much stronger the presidency is today than 1788? What a different country we're in, how much more diverse we are, larger, the potential for mischief and illegality so much greater. And to say, it wasn't done 200 years ago, so we're not going to do it today, is originalism on steroids. It is the wrong way to approach cases, and it is terrible.
There were a lot of things that were different. Like, I don't think women or black people could vote in 1788. So
among many other things. There was slavery.
So, okay. How does that play out? We'll get to the public education situation, because that is more consequential, arguably. I don't know why you're necessarily saying that, because how does this decision on nationwide injunctions affect? Like, give me an example of how we're going to see this play out.
So my understanding is it's effective starting July 27th. If it's not July 27th, it's within a day or two. Once that comes, if you are born here to people who are not legally here, I believe the Trump administration is going to say you're not a citizen. Now, that's inconsistent with the 14th Amendment. It just is. It's inconsistent with case law, with everything. In the past, the parents would challenge that and say, no, my kid is a citizen, whatever. And the court would issue an order saying this kid's a citizen, and everybody like him is a citizen, because this is a patently unconstitutional order that can't be enforced. Now, and the only way around that, Pete, is to file an expensive class action. We had this thing called class actions, where you sue on behalf of a whole bunch of people. They're really hard to do. They're really expensive, and you need lawyers who want to make a profit to do it. Very difficult. So now, almost every person who is legally a citizen, but the Trump administration determines not to be a citizen, will have to file their own lawsuit, unless they're in a district where a court has already ruled. And that's not very many. And so to enforce the idea that this executive order is patently unconstitutional, which it is going to be much more difficult. The reason I'm saying it's not as impactful as the other case is because the other case is going to wreck thousands of public schools around the country tomorrow or this fall.
It's going to wreck public schools?
We'll get to it. Yeah. Oh. So on the birthright citizenship, at least they didn't reach the merits of the case. All they said was federal judges can't stop the government from enforcing this unless it's for a particular plaintiff in a particular case. Listen, Sotomayor, the liberals dissented angrily, madly, passionately, and correctly, because we've been issuing universal injunctions now for half a century. The fact that we didn't do it in 1788 is absurdly stupid reason. The Biden administration, the student loan program was enjoined because of one case. The Affordable Care Act stuff during Obama administration was enjoined because of one case. And this is, and by the way, one does wonder, when a Democrat president comes back, will the Supreme Court adhere to this? And there's every reason to think they may.
Was a kind of a win. I think you called it a sop to liberals today on healthcare.
There wasn't. I said that only because the person on the street.
In another 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court preserved the provision of the Affordable Care Act that requires insurance companies to cover preventative health services at no cost to patients. That sounds like a good thing to me. Health policy.
It is a good thing. But it's not a case for the person on the street, Pete. The Affordable Care Act gives 18 people the authority to decide what preventative medicine, what preventative measures must be taken in health insurance policies. And some people who hate the Affordable Care Act argued that they were not appointed in accordance with constitutional procedures, which has been a big issue in the Roberts Court. The Consumer Product Safety Commission has been decimated and all that stuff. But Justice Roberts has a thing for the Affordable Care Act. He likes it. And Kavanaugh went along, so they upheld this. It's an important case, just not compared to the other two.
Do you want to move on to it?
I think the high school case is so important, Pete. I really do. And by the way, I think it yielded the most angry dissents by the liberals, even more than the birthright citizenship case. So
go ahead.
Well, so let me tell it in the way of a story, if I could.
Okay.
Montgomery County, Maryland, is, I think, one of the biggest, largest, and most diverse school districts in the country. It's definitely one of the most diverse. And a few years ago, some religious parents objected to their children being exposed to classes, books, and ideas. And ideas are the important part of that. Classes, books, and ideas suggesting that LGBTQ folk be treated with respect and equality under the law. So, a fifth grader might read a book, I Have Two Dads. Or an eighth grader might read a book, I Went to my two moms' wedding, or whatever. And religious parents objected to that. When they first objected to it, the school district said, okay, we'll try to, if you want to pull your kid out of that class, if you want to give them an exemption not to take that test or whatever, we'll try to accommodate that. But as you can expect, that led to total chaos because there were many requests and it's a huge school district. And it wasn't, it would be easy to say, I don't want my kid attending a 4 o'clock class every Thursday or not go to ROTC or ROTC. That's easy. That's not the complaint. The complaint is, I don't want my kid exposed to this idea at all. So if you read a book on a Monday and you're still discussing on a Thursday, or a student raises it on a Thursday, there's no way to know if that's going to happen, right? So the school district said, we're really sorry. Too bad. We can't accommodate you anymore, which is what they wanted anyway. Because then the parent, this is part of Alex's Alex attempt to destroy public schools in this country. So now they brought a lawsuit and they said it violated the First Amendment. First Amendment, you said, well, it violated the idea that Congress shall make no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion. They said that my kid being exposed to this idea substantially burdens our religious exercise, which, by the way, is really stupid because no one said they couldn't pray. No one said they couldn't wear a yarmulke. There was no religious exercise involved in this at all, just conscience. And the word in the First Amendment is exercise, not conscience. And that's, to me, a big difference. But to religious people, it's not. So they sued. And the lower courts were like, this would cause so much chaos. You're out of your mind. You lose. And the Supreme Court reverses. And now parents have the right to object to anything that violates their religious conscience. And their kids have to be yanked out of classrooms, libraries, discussions, books removed. And so I want to give you the best example of how this could, of the chaos that could happen here, Pete. I've talked on your show before that when I was at the Department of Justice, I had a big church-state case involving government funding to parochial schools. And the challenge was, don't use my taxpayer dollars for parochial schools. I was on the government side of that. Amazingly, the plaintiff was not the ACLU or some liberal group. The plaintiff was Seventh-day Adventists because that religion believes strongly in separation of church and state. It's part of their religious faith. So this is the irony of all this. In the country now, if you're a Seventh-day Adventist and you don't want your kid exposed to this very case because you think this case violates your religious, tenets, and you're a 12th grader having a course on constitutional law, you can say, I don't want my kid being exposed to the ideas in this Supreme Court case. You really could do that. Now imagine all the religious objections that conservatives are going to make to all of the LGBTQ books, lessons out there.
So I'm trying to think about the news and these decisions in terms of how bad are they? Who do they impact and how do they impact them? And what I'm hearing here is at least the arguments that were made about here in this Montgomery County school, where they're apparently like the most religiously diverse county
Yes.
in the nation, which
Yes.
is interesting. But and the arguments that were made, they seem to be around LGBT characters and lessons, anything that has to do with sexual orientation. And what I'm saying is to myself, to make it be a little less bad, is all right, well, that's terrible. But so our kids in school won't maybe be learning about, or this will be punitive to all of us, in my opinion, but especially to LGBT kids and their safety and their vulnerability and so on. But does this extend to anything else?
Yes, that's what I'm trying to tell you. If your religious faith,
let me give one example, because a lot of it is about sexual orientation and religion there. But what about race and what in history lessons around, say, slavery or something?
That's what I was going to say to you. If your religion teaches that whites and blacks shouldn't live, work, and be in school together, and they're trying to teach you Brown versus Board of Education, you're allowed to opt out. You must.
Who's saying that? But with all due respect, like what religious, they don't really say that their religion. Nobody comes to a school board.
They used to.
But no one's making that argument per se at a school board meeting, or like who's bold enough to say, they'll say you're teaching history that's making, I mean, I've seen this is at my school board. They're making white kids feel bad about themselves and teaching kids to hate America. We all know that this administration wants, quote, patriotic history being taught and so on. So it seems like it'll be more likely that they just don't teach certain things rather than give parents.
That's not, Pete, that's not the object of this. So you have to remember, this is a well-organized, well-funded campaign on the right to destroy public schools. There was another huge case this term that would have dropped another shoe on public schools, but the court divided 4-4 because Barrett recused. It was a two-pronged attack. We don't have to go into that right now, but there was another case this term that was also going to be really hard. Pete, if you bring a case, if your kid is not excused, or your kid doesn't get the exemption, or the school is negligent in not giving your kid the exemption, and you sue, you can get attorney's fees, you can get money. Now, will that happen? I don't know. What I do know is this is a well-funded effort to make public schools worse, so that the people who are bringing this can say, see how bad public schools are? We need to go to a purely... That really is what's going on here. And if we started talking about the other case, I would say 2 sentences about it, which was basically the attempt to make prayer and religious proselytization in public schools, charter schools, okay. That was the other case that basically turned public schools into religious schools. That case was dismissed because it was 4-4. You would see the two-pronged attack. You don't have to trust me. I put on Blue Sky today Justice Sotomayor's quote, where she describes that the chaos from this decision will render the administration of public schools impossible. Those are her words, not mine. So you can believe her if you don't believe me.
Well, I mean, what I really want to do, and I will next week, is talk to some public school administrators and school board types, as well as teachers and union leaders, about what this will mean.
They were all on the other side of this case.
Well, yeah, I know that. And this is just one part of the attack that you've been talking about from many different viewpoints, and I've been talking about from others on public education that has been underway from the right for as long as we've been here, for as long as, the decision to segregate schools.
Right. This really, I mean, it's amazing, but it all ties back to originalism too, which began as a response to Brown versus Board of Education by people like William F. Buckley and famous people like that. I by the way, I think you know as much about this next sentence as I do, but the attack on public schools here is definitely race-based, right? That's what's going on.
I mean, it's certainly race-based primarily, but now it's clearly sexual orientation and identity-based too. So it's trying to not only limit opportunity, but also, I would argue, limit safety, create more danger physically. And lastly, they're doing everything they can to make sure that a child who identifies however they identify doesn't feel comfortable, doesn't feel seen, and is ashamed to be open about who they are. And that is grotesque and horrible and hateful and will kill kids, because kids will kill themselves.
And Pete, Justice Sam Alito began the opinion after the initial remark. Began his opinion by saying a lot of people are offended by same-sex marriage. and yet their kids have to read that same-sex marriage is okay. It is not a coincidence that he started this way. A year ago, you asked me, will the same-sex marriage decision be overturned? And I said, almost certainly not. And I'm the guy who said Roe was going to be overturned, which I was right about. So I said to you, no, I don't see a world where that happens. Pete, I don't feel that way anymore.
Oh,
they'll never make it retroactive. If you were married 3 years ago, 5 years ago, as a same-sex couple, you'll still be married. But this Supreme Court is inviting a lawsuit to reconsider that.
Well, speaking of retroactive, is your citizenship retroactive?
No. If you're a citizen on July 26th, you're a citizen. It's
okay.
only if you're born in America after July 26th. Well, that's how the executive order reads today. They could change it. But as of today, if you're a citizen on July 26th, you're a citizen. It's I guess I do want to say that I think Mike's an insightful guy, and he made a point that very few people are willing to make, but you and I should talk about this in the next year, as we talk about the Supreme Court. In 1936, I'll be done in 2 minutes. In 1936, FDR went on the national radio and said, we're in a depression. We're in a freaking depression, and the court is destroying our country, and we have to exchange the old justices for the new justices. He called it an emergency. It was. After Dred Scott in 1857, when the Supreme Court said black people couldn't be citizens, Lincoln said it's a terrible decision and we're basically in an emergency. We need the media to understand, somebody to understand, that this is not Reagan and Bush. This is not the Warren Court, which I don't like. I don't like the Warren Court. You know that. Even though it was liberal results, I don't believe those were the right decisions. This is a once in a generation or once in the history leader who is doing terrible things, and the court seems to be saying, go ahead, we don't care. It's really scary.
Anything else happen today?
There were a couple other cases that are important to some people, but not a lot. I would say again that the American people should, if nothing else, rally to the idea that if Justice Sotomayor is going to spend, which she did, 25 minutes reading an impassioned dissent about these cases, we should be able to see her. There is no video of that ever, Pete. It is gone from history, and it's crazy. It's just crazy if you think about it. That's my last comment.
I'm reading Politico. Email just came out. More action on the way. Chief Justice John Roberts announced from the bench that the court plans to issue orders next week on Monday and Thursday. Monday's orders are likely to include grants of review from a conference the justices held yesterday. Thursdays will likely address cases impacted by the decisions handed down this week. Is there anything?
Well, so the citizenship case does create some procedural chaos in the lower court on this stuff. So they're going to have to do something about that probably. But they announced yesterday that today was the last day of the term. So that's why he announced that, because it's a surprise. Steve Vladeck, the shadow docket guy, great guy, was the first to break the news yesterday that term is over tomorrow. Apparently not. Pete, what happens when the Supreme Court finally ends the term? The justices, most of them go to Europe, go to Salzburg, go teach in faraway places, go on yachts. I wish they would start that today, because there's only more mischief coming next week. This is now clearly the worst court in American history, and we've had some bad.
All right. Well,
and hold on. For loyal, regular people who listen to you and thus listen to me when I'm on your show, they'll appreciate this. After a 2-year horror show, I am back in my old house. The renovation is over. My life is better. The dogs are happier, and it's a very positive.
Well, we love to hear that. Unfortunately, we preferred you at your interim house because your audio in this new space is awful. So what if I fly down there and just set up a situation where your audio and video will just be perfect every time, because it's just echoey, and you didn't decorate this space yet or something. They got to put a carpet down. It's a little echoey.
You did that once before, like 10 years ago, and you're welcome to do it anytime you want, my friend.
Time to upgrade it. You're broadcasting on one of those old record players with the horn. Walkie-talkie.
Well, I'm 67 years old. Cut me a break here.
You have young kids. I mean, get for God's sake.
I have to see my kids. They're teenagers. They're out galloping.
Yeah, I get it. You need a dedicated studio set up, and I'm going to come down there, and I'll stay in the guest house. That's actually a guest house now.
We do finally have a real guest house, though not yet, because it has no water, but it will eventually.
It has no what?
Water.
Well, I'll come into the house to use the water.
Anytime you want, my friend. Anytime you want.
And to see your wife. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. It's been way too long. I'm so happy to see you and hear your voice, regardless of what the bad things that you need. All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Take care, my friend. Bye.
All right, everybody. That's it.